Okay. Welcome everybody. We're just going to give folks a brief moment to come on in before we get started. All right, welcome. Thank you for coming to our 5th Z Civic Conversation. My name is Jordan Battle. I'm the Patron and Community Engagement Manager at Z Space. Tonight, we'll be having an open conversation with some Native and Indigenous theater makers in the Bay Area. But first, I want to start this evening with our land acknowledgement. Z Space holds itself accountable to the work of undoing oppression and advancing equity to overcome our country's bitter history of segregation and racial inequality. As part of that work, we must start by acknowledging that Z Space resides on the ancestral and unceded land of San Francisco, California, the traditional land site of the Ramaytush Ohlone tribe. Since we are meeting virtually, we recognize that we are all on different unceded lands. We pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land of which we are meeting, and we recognize those Native communities and extend our deepest gratitude to those who have stewarded this land and offer our respect to their elders, past, present, and future. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and drop that Native land link in the chat for everyone. Feel free to let us know whose lands you're calling in from today. Part of Z Space's mission is to encourage camaraderie among artists and community. And I'm looking forward to hearing from the artists we have on today's panel. So I'm just going to bring up that first person. Réal, do you want to come on up and introduce yourself?
Hindi hiari kwarishkani Réal Vargas Alanis inda ima anakueshkani yokuch territory. Hi everybody, Réal Vargas Alanis. Pronouns inda ima or they them series, and I am currently calling in from Yokuch territory. Let's see, can I say a little bit about myself? Let's see, I am a community organizer. I am also the artistic director of In the Margin, which is an arts and advocacy organization. I am also the co-owner of Sexy Tacos, where the tacos are sexy and so are you. And artistically, I am a director, actor, playwright, and producer.
Wonderful, love it, Sexy Tacos. Fran, do you want to come on up and introduce yourself for us as well?
Hello, I'm Fran. Currently on the Ohlone territory, but raised on Yoku territory and descended from the Tepehuan territory or land. And I am the managing director of In the Margin. And artistically, I'm a director, playwright, and dramaturg.
Lovely, thank you. Stephen?
Yes, hi. Ha, Merawika. Hola. Natse namana himehika. I'm Mexican and Comanche. Abonatsuga Sikatavin. I'm happy to be here. It's Flores. I am an actor, sort of a multimedia artist. I also write, do poetry, movement, public performance, some music making, and sometimes I'll slap a little writing in some plays. So yeah, nice to meet everyone. I'm happy to be here.
Perfect. And Matt, why don't you come on up?
Hangamaheji, everybody. My name is Matt Kizer. I am a proud member of the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California. I am currently, I guess, the artistic director of Native Writers Theater Company, brand new this year. And I am a song and dance man, writer, playwright that is, wants to tell my people's story and any stories really. But on the ancestral lands of the coastal Miwok, and am very excited and proud to be with you all. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you all. So we do have one more panelist who will be joining us a little later. Kanyon Coyote woman Sayers-Rood will be joining us about halfway through the conversation, but we're going to get started with this great group because everybody is important. But I'm going to go ahead and just start with a very hopefully easy question for everybody, is what led you to theater and the arts as a practice? And anyone who wants to jump in first, go right ahead. All right, Matt, you giggled, so it's up to you.
Gosh. Yeah, well, I've always been singing. I sang in a boys choir when I was a kid, and my mom wanted me to do that, and so I did because I loved it, and then I was always singing, I was in the sports and football and baseball and I would always sing in the locker rooms, and I was also hanging out with the wrong kids. So they thought it would be really funny if they got me an audition for our show choir in high school. And I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to, not go because, I had to show them what's up. And so I did. I went and I think I sang Happy Birthday and got into this performance show choir in Nevada. And, 3 years went by and had gone to, sang at the Vienna Youth and Music Festival in Vienna, Austria, and toured with the musical Godspell through Germany and Austria, and then sang at the Montreux Jazz Festival, the Irish Youth and Music Festival. I with the show choir and was like, singing and dancing, learning how to dance. I got cast in Anything Goes and had to learn how to tap dance in like 6 weeks, and so I got really fired up. And started taking dance classes and was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I know I love it. And so started competing vocally and went to college to sang with Nevada Opera. And I just was like, I was just fired up about theater and just about singing and dancing. All I wanted to do was, I wanted to be, be Jean Valjean, but I wanted to be Javert. I wanted to do anything to be in a musical, a big Broadway musical. And that's kind of what drove me to jump into theater. And I after that, I kind of just raised kids. I settled down. I was like, I'm going to raise kids. I'm going to be a dad. And then I threw my hat back in the ring about 6 years ago, and here I am. And so I've been very lucky and very blessed to do theater professionally, and now I want to start telling different stories. So I'm excited to I want to write the great Native American musical. Let's do that. Let's I know that there's a couple out there, but I want to try to write my own. Not saying that I know how to write musicals, but I'll give it a try. Why not? So that's me. That's how I got into it. I wasn't going to stop. I have a lot of interests. So I'm just musicals and theater and singing and dancing and acting and doing all that is just I think it's just part of art making. Then not only that is just, why not make jewelry, and let's make some clothes, and, let's paint and let's draw, and, so let's do it all. So that's me. Pat.
I'm gonna go from Javert to Javert, so Réal.
Oh my God, I did that to myself, huh? So I mean, I guess in regards to like artistry or artistically exposure, I guess I should say it that way, is growing up, my parents used to be DJs. And so, when you grow up in certain cultures, it's like, you grow up with a lot of like the regalia and like the dances and all the festivals and whatnot. And then also, growing up with a family that's a DJ, it was literally like a bunch of parties every weekend. I mentioned this because then it comes into my aesthetic, but it's like, like quinceañeras and bodas or whatever, it was just like someone farted, we throw a party about it. Like, yay. And so I was always like, I love music, and my mom used to be a musician. She's a percussionist. And so as things progressed, my mom was a percussionist. My brother is a tattoo artist and a piercer. And so he was studying art, right? And illustration. Wonderful, wonderful, realistic works that were just gorgeous. Something that I still can't do to this day, but it inspired me to then start drawing on my own, creating my own things, and I really wanted to be a comic book artist, and who knows, maybe I'll still do it. But so then it went from different kind of art sectors. I ended up in music, so I'm also a percussionist, and then I actually just ran into my first drama teacher. And so when it got to middle school, 8th grade was the first time that I had an audition for some sort of theatrical work. And it was for The Christmas Carol. And so after that, I auditioned, got in, I was cast as the Ghost of Christmas Present. And from then, that's when I started studying theater. From 8th grade all the way up into college. I've had the privilege of working internationally and nationally, professionally, and it's something that I feel very grateful for in regards to this career path. And it's been a lot of work, absolutely, and it's been a lot of challenges, as I'm sure like all of us have encountered. But yeah, that's kind of in a gist, kind of like my trajectory. But yes, and Matt, I was Javert in a high school production of Les Mis. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pop it over to, go ahead, Matt.
I was Jean Valjean. I sang Bring Him Home for it. So, we could do that. We'll do the native version of that whole scene with Javert and Jean Valjean. Let's do it.
Let's do it right now. No, I'm kidding. I'm just gonna pop it over to Fran. Go for it.
Thanks. That's great, because I'm like always a person that doesn't volunteer. Like, I don't really have that impulse for some reason. But for me, I come from, also music was kind of the entry for me into the arts. My family has generationally have been musicians, and I followed that interest and was in choirs as well, and did a show choir. But I don't know, I know they're intense, but I don't know if mine was intense, but it was fun. And then that kind of, I had a high school counselor who, as I was trying to add another music class on top of my schedule, was like, maybe you should try a drama class since you're already doing so much music. And so I did, and that's how I ended up in high school drama, but in as an upperclassman in high school. And I think I just really liked how that medium could be everything. It could be visual arts, it could be music, that you can incorporate so many versions of storytelling into it, that carried me into college, as well, doing both music and theater, studying for both. and then just, again, seeing that storytelling can be done so many ways. Like I'm a fan of like, and I've performed with like a 300-person choir with like a full orchestra, and that's like an experience that everyone, I think, as a performer should have. It's, pretty spectacular, but then also like performing an intimate piece with a small audience in a black box, right? Like those are very resonating versions of storytelling for me. And then professionally, I've been fortunate to like, be on tour and for children's theater, for musicals, and I'm also worked and studied abroad. And yeah, and yeah, I just, storytelling, I like it, I dig it.
Stephen?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I guess that it is me next. What was could you restate the question real quick? I just wanted to.
Yeah, what led you to theater and the arts as a practice?
Right, what led me there? Well, it's I guess you could say it was at first one out of necessity in an emotional situation. I had a lot of moving around when I was young, so I just kind of became the comedian, the family sort of thing. So I was always like doing impressions or acting a fool, dancing, and trying to make everyone laugh. And then I just I just was always like into art and things and drawing and crafting. And then when I went into high school, I went to this it's like an art high school. It's like a charter school that was just developed for for kids who wanted to do that and not regular like sports and things like that at like big high schools. So I went there and I got into music and even more arts and silversmithing, all these kinds of things. And I really I started being like, I don't know, I love the movies. So I was talking to my brother one day and I said, oh man, I really want to be an actor. He's like, well, you got to do drama. I was like, I don't want to do drama. I want to be a drama kid. Like, like it's like everything I watch too much TV and, all those sorts of things. But he's like, well, if you want to be an actor, you got to do drama. So, oh, you're right. I guess I do. And then I did that. And man, I just really just exploded in that. I was like, this is what feels absolutely right. And it was, so I kind of got into it deep there. And then when I graduated, I just kept going. So I moved to like Los Angeles to pursue professional film and TV acting. And then with some theater gigs here and there just to have some fun, and so I was there for 6 years. I also did some professional stunt work, and that was really cool. And then eventually I wanted to go back to theater and really hone those actings, the more art into that sort of thing. So I moved to New York. I was in New Mexico for a little bit, but then I moved to New York and got into theater there and in the more of the Native community on the East Coast there. And then that led to me getting a job with the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. So I was living in Oregon for a year, and then I moved to the Bay Area after that year. And well, now I'm here. And so just kind of now just exploring art and wherever I can with acting, but also with performance art, crafting, puppeting, and yeah, just that's where I'm at right now. So thank you.
No, that's great. I figured we should all get to know a little bit about all of you before I start picking your brains for all the questions that everybody keeps asking. But so the next thing that I wanted to move to is, why do you think there's a lack of Native and Indigenous representation in our theaters? And I mean like specifically in the Bay Area. I know it's missing everywhere, but like, why do you think it's missing in the Bay Area?
We're extinct in case
Had to clutch my pearls. Oh goodness.
I'm sure. Yeah, that's that's it. We just don't exist. That's why. That's no, but does someone else want to come in with a more?
Yeah, well, that is glorious. Yeah, you know, I think there's a I think there's a lot of people don't know that we're alive and thriving and doing, you know, awesome stuff, you know, and I think that theater companies around the Bay Area, I think don't know that there's Native playwrights or haven't really looked into it. And I think that they just are afraid to cast it. They're afraid to go do all the work that it takes to actually use natives and actually use a Native playwright and actually do all of the work that goes along with culturally sensitive things with Indigenous Native people. I think that's the hard part. I think that's what you know. There's a lot of I had no clue that there were so many natives doing art. You know, because I felt so alone for so long, and I didn't know that there's so many people that share the same type of experiences of a native actor, of a native performer, artist. So I just think that they're afraid. So now's the time to not be afraid. If you're out there watching, don't be afraid. Call and read a Native play, put it in your season.
No, I love that. I did attend the Native Writers Theater showcase, and I watched the Q&A, and I think you were totally spot on in saying that like there's so much research that goes into doing Native plays and having Native artists that I think doing all of that extra work is not something all theaters are willing to invest in. How do I phrase this question? Oh God, it sounds terrible in my head, so I'm not going to say it out loud. Is there something that even now that y'all could say that could like let folks know it is work, but it's worth it when you do it? How do we tell people when the work happens, it's worth it? That's how I'm going to try to phrase that question.
Well, our stories are just as important as anybody else's stories. And in theater and in film, we have all been portrayed as like this, you know, one-dimensional, two-dimensional character. And it isn't until the last 20 years that we've been able to actually have some representation in mainstream media. And so, you know, I feel like, I don't know, I went off on a tangent, but
it's all good. I'm
somebody
following that, and then I'll piggyback off of that. And you know, even when it's like mainstream media, and you know, speaking in theater, a lot of the things that are mainstream do not include us, right? It's and if they do, because we are extinct, they don't know where we are. And so you know, let's utilize like the Fantastics for an example, right? There's Mortimer, which is a Native character. However, I mean, it's like, if you are familiar with the play, the character doesn't speak, and then all they do is just there's like a little gag with one that plays the cowboy and the other one that plays the Indian, and it's just like the cowboys and Indians, and so Mortimer just dies. Like that's kind of like the gag, right? And so when you have musicals like this, that's the role that is written for us, but then you don't cast any natives, but then also like, why would I want to take that role? So this is where we're kind of stuck in, right? Where it's like, these are the things that are continuing to be produced. These are the things that are continuing to have a life. And another thing that really gets me is when someone brands it a specific like native, like it needs to be a native play in order for you to be able to work on it. And it's like, what does that mean to you? Does it mean that that we all have to be wearing like buckskin and like be running around, not necessarily like speaking, because that's what you think that a native play is? Or can a native play be an original work that doesn't necessarily center the explanation to the white gaze of nativeness, but instead just kind of explores a story that's through the lens of folks who are native, who are, the director might be native and the actors as well. That's a native story. That's a native play. And it doesn't have to be talking about some mystical, I don't know, but like it could be some subject that can be exploring some fantastical astronomical thing that we're all up in space or something and we're all queer, just somewhere up in, I don't know what play this is, but apparently we're in space and we're all gay and we're all natives and we're exploring the moon. I don't know what it is, but like, you know, I'm rambling now too, but like that's where I want to see the trajectory going. I want to see where are the new innovative works that that's not the Fantastics, that's not like, I don't want to start, you know, throwing other plays out there because I don't want to like bash on them, but you know, how can we make it to where we're not utilized as a tool or as a device that comes in and is just part of the scenery, or comes in at the last minute and gives someone some herbs so they can like be well again, and you know, we'll come over here and be like, ooh, flowers, ooh. And it's like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to actually tell a great, like Matt said, I'm so sorry, a like full dimensional, full fleshed out story. Now I'm going on a real tangent. So I'm just going to bounce it over to someone else. Someone take it over.
I think that's such a, I feel like it's a large question. I think it has several answers. One answer being, yeah, you know, how Réal said in the beginning, like, oh, is there a sink? Yes, it's there's a history. You decimate a people, there's not that many left. And then when they are put away and not seen, very few are going to pursue something and maybe not even reveal what they are. So I think that's also goes toward, are you asking? It's, and it's not also, that's also not being revealed because there's no safety to do that, because when you do that, people will see you as other, and then you can't be like everyone else, or you can't be seen as a human, you know. So there's that, there is that answer. And then there's the other one where we can get into the technicalities of like Hollywood and like how we're portrayed and seen, and yeah, that happens too. And then I think the third one, which I think we touched on just a little bit, I thought I heard, I think someone making this point of like, we can get stuck in this conversation of why isn't this happening? Whoa, wow, you know, what can we do? Or blah, blah, blah. It's like, how about you just reach out? And I think what that comes is getting clear on what the work is. Like, what is this work? We can say, well, you got to do the work. That's it. It's easy to say, I got to do the work. But the work is work. And it doesn't have to be hard work. It doesn't have to be fearful, scared work. It's very joyful work to connect with people. And so I feel like the work that needs to be done is looking within ourselves, all of us, and kind of getting together to do away with this fear that we can't ask difficult, hard questions and have hard conversations, since these conversations and questions haven't been happening. If I may, for example, uh, you had a question and then you were like, oh, it sounds terrible in my head, I don't want to say it. But it's like, but if you don't ask it, then we're not going to get anywhere. Though I'm very appreciative of your sensitivity that you don't want to offend. I also want to be sensitive to your desire to ask something you don't know. And so there's a lot of healing I feel like that needs to be happen so that we can take our sensitivity into account. We can also maturely put ourselves aside so that we can think of each other, so that we can have these hard conversations, so that we can finally have them and then be like, okay, cool, now now we can move on because we know now. And so I think it's like getting clear what that work is, which if I'm gonna like not also be broad, but be specific, it's ask the questions, invite, talk, building community that isn't like here, let me write this check to take care of that. That's awesome. We need that. We need production support, yes. But we want your friendship too. We don't just want your money. Like, I feel like this is where a lot of the fear comes in us connecting, is because we have a past. We might be ashamed of it. And that might be preventing us to actually connect. And when we do, then we're happy and we're joyful. And then now we have friends, we have friendships, you know, and that's kind of the beautiful thing about theater is things are professional and they're also personal. It's such, you know, they're like, be professional. It's like, this is the most personal industry I feel like I've worked in, where, you know, people want to work with the friends. They want to work with, you know, oh, you know, my nephew, he's starting to act, you know, let's get him in a play. It's community. So it's like, reach out, talk, come over. Let's do that. Meet me and let's be curious about each other. So now I'm starting to ramble. So I'm gonna
So then I guess I can add like the question of why it's challenging, right? I think it's, you know, kind of like that humor Réal was used of like the extinct. There's also an assumption that there aren't resources available or organizations already embedded within the industry that can be assets, and kind of which is a shame, right? Like, why isn't there an impulse to network with Indigenous organizations, right? And especially since there are currently a lot of focus in new works that kind of embody that and describe the works that I was describing, right? So it's, you know, Native Writers Theater, right, for example, is creating works, Alter Theater, and there's Safe Harbors really does, you know, train Native artists as well. So there's a multitude of organizations and resources. And so this, you know, approach that it's difficult is also just an unwillingness to network with us as community members, as Stephen was saying.
You know, and that's something that Fran and I sometimes speak about in regards to what Stephen said is very much like transcending the transactional, right? Moving something that's beyond just the transaction, like the actual community building of it. Feeling that you actually want to work with me, as opposed to just kind of like marking the box. And what Fran mentioned is something that we've been talking about a lot in regards to the willingness for PWIs that have clout wanting to work with us. And especially organizations that are run by marginalized folks, for marginalized folks, tends to not have the same type of, I don't want to use the word clout, but respect from PWIs, where it's, they don't see the value in it, and they don't see, and they just flat out don't respect the work that we do.
Or acknowledge.
Or acknowledged, absolutely. Yeah. And so I feel that is shifting, which is great. But there's also been moments where, you know, a lot PWI, predominantly white institution, And so, there's like wonderful groups, and where some of us are part of the accountability work group for the Bay Area and whatnot. And it's so interesting that there's a lot of folks in this conversation of how we can do X, Y, Z, and how to navigate and yada, yada, yada. Yet sometimes when we approach the group and say, hey, we need some sort of support with maybe cross promotion, literally posting it on your social media, that's even a hard thing for them to do. And it's one of those things of like, okay, that was something a very, very like simple request. And or can we utilize your logos to support these students that are undergoing harsh conditions within their theater departments? And we are standing up for them, saying that as theater practitioners within the professional theater realm, we are seeing what's happening here within these institutions. And we are telling you, theater departments, that that's not okay. All we're asking for is your logo to support this letter. That's too much for you. So then what is, to go back to Stephen's, the way that he said the work. So what work are you doing? Like, what's the work? Because even when we come up with things and we give you not you, but when we give them like a laid out plan of like, hey, could you support in this? That's not even just a paycheck, right? We're not asking for funds. It would be great, but we're asking for other things that could be feasible. They're still ignored. And so it's just one of those things where now it's like, okay, then what do we do? What are we doing? What's going on here? Like, now I'm about to go into another tangent, so I'm just gonna pass it over.
I feel like Réal, don't let me forget about the whole thing with like logos and asking for help, just because I have just a little bit of experience with that. But with regards to conversations and healing, Stephen, you hit it right on the head, is to have open, decolonized conversations to help with the healing, and to have those hard questions and have those things, because sometimes people just don't know. One, they didn't even know that we're still around, right? And I think McGeezy Pinsino from the 1491s said, "Hey, I don't need your pity. We're alive and thriving." And I'm like, it really sparked a thing in me, because you spend so much time going, "Oh my gosh, I gotta, I'm my people, and I gotta, and I'm gonna try to lift them up." And it's like, well, we're lifted up already. We're lifting ourselves up, and so I feel like that attitude towards the PWIs is a good thing. And I think that the question needs to be asked over and over again to those institutions to say, hey, we need you to uplift the Native voice, to amplify the Native voice. And we'd like to think that you're with us. Help us do that. And I think with the help us and amplify, those two words, I think those have been very successful just for the first part of Native Writers Theater Company. And I know that I'm guessing that probably some of those theater companies may have not had a great track record with Native theater companies or with Natives in general. And I feel like, well, then let's start the conversation again. Let's keep going. Let's heal. Let's heal, and let's get more productions, Native productions in your world. Help us, and we'll help you understand who we are. And let's tell those stories.
Matt, can you expand a little bit on that in regards to if they didn't have a good experience with?
I don't have specifics. I don't have any.
No,
any
not specifics, just like thoughts wise. I just found that interesting.
Well, I can speak. So in 2018, at the end of 2018, there was a Native and Indigenous town hall at the equity offices in New York City. And I was there it was the first day I was in New York, and I was there to do the world premiere of Moby Dick, start rehearsals with that. And I was thinking, I'm going to go to the equity offices and I'm going to be around so many natives. Oh my gosh, it's going to be ridiculous how many natives are going to be there. And I can't wait. And I get there, and it was for all the casting directors there as well. There was a lot of casting directors, but there was maybe 25 maybe native actors in the room who, and I was like, oh, there's not that many. I was really shocked, and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, God, there's got to be more actors out there. And they were just talking about one of the things that they really talked about was casting practices and things on your resume, and how people how casting directors act towards native actors in the casting room. Some stories were like, oh, I see that you speak your language. Speak. Right. So like, I mean, can you imagine being in the room and somebody's like, speak your language, or you're reading this script and it says, Native American, and but no real, no tribe, no, and it has all of these native words on there, but it's kind of gibberish, and so to have those kind of like real tough experiences of it in the casting room, to go, what, and one of the great conversations that came out of that was that when you do put your tribal affiliation, or when you do put, like, you speak those languages, you do put those things, you can say, hey, that's an open invitation for us to have a conversation about that. But how you ask those things and what happens respectfully towards another person is very, very key. And so that, I hope I answered your question, Réal, and I'm so sorry. Kanyon, I can't wait to meet you.
Yeah, Kanyon, let's take a brief moment. Please introduce yourselves and hop into the discussion that has started with why is there a lack of representation, and has gone actually already naturally into my next conversation about what Indigenous and Native artists need for relationship building. So feel free to introduce yourself and then hop on in with an answer.
Mishmi Tuhis, Countercut Kanyon, Coyote Woman, Sayers-Rood. I am daughter of tribal chairwoman Anne Marie Sayers of the Indian Canyon Mutsun Band of Costano and Ohlone people. I identify as a Mutsun Ohlone California Indigenous Two-Spirit consultant, relative, community member, artist, activist, edutainer. I started a business called Kanyon Consulting, where our goals are bridging the gap between Indigenous and contemporary value systems. And lately, we've been conducting cultural competency workshops and cultural sensitivity trainings with government agencies and smaller permaculture-like circles. And so I'm really lucky to be in this environment because I consider myself like an in-between. And it's ironically quite cathartic and healing, given that I'm able to share perspective, sometimes even vent about how Western settler colonialism is problematic, and be witnessed and heard. That being said, I'm really motivated to be that in between, to voice where these inequities are, because like with this whole Jedi movement, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, sometimes Silicon Valley likes to make a certificate, tell people to take the class and be done with it. And it's like, actually, it means systemic change. It means approaching with diligency, and it also means uncomfortable conversations and actions. And so I'm new in the business realm of this, but I'm passionate, and this is my lifelong walk of life. So I can't quite like tell you like, oh, I've spent this many years in here. This is like my life, but I started my business in 2018. So I mean, like, formally been working on that. And being that I've been raised in my ancestral homelands, I recognize my privileges. and being raised on the land of my ancestors, and where Indigenous protocol has always been respected and followed, acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of whose land we are on, not making any decisions about what happens on those lands unless the Indigenous peoples are consulted with and collaborated with. And so I bring that into my consultations and mitigation procedures around cultural resource protection and sacred site protection. And then in other realms, like when I mentioned permaculture, especially when all these people, well-intended settlers trying to say like, oh, we want to be inclusive, or we want the Native people's perspective, or if they even think about inviting us to these edible and medicinal plant foraging classes that don't talk about colonization, and they don't talk about acknowledging the native land that they're on, but they totally love to cherry pick and profit off of Indigenous peoples. Yeah, so I'm very familiar with this circle. So I'm like, oh, cool, I'm just jumping right in. I'm very familiar with this. I'm familiar with seeing red face in both theater and movies. And so like, it's relationship building. I do understand some of the struggles that some theater companies may navigate in regards to maybe they don't know where to find the Native actors. However, that also means is we connect to community. And I am a public speaker, and I've been brought into the realm of theater, and I have also been a collaborator and an artist where I was able to offer my creative input to offer to a choreographed piece. So I may not have gotten my educational background and focus in that realm because, well, when we think about history, you know, it's not really the most equitable space. It's a luxury at times for people who are on scarcity, who operate through scarcity, through historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, transgenerational trauma, and on survival mode. The arts are not always the first arena that we can navigate with freedoms, even though ironically culture and art are right here. Like, it's how I live. I never went about it in the public forum. So I never did like improv classes. I never did acting classes, dance, any of those. However, how I live in the world and how I relate to my Native cousins, we are familiar with that in a different fashion, given that we were brought up in our community and our culture. So there are many Natives who can share themselves in these arenas, but they don't have the same walk of life that many organizations would look for. Oh, how many years have you been focusing on acting? Have you ever thought about acting or want to do this? It's like, we have community members there. And I understand that we can't just be like, oh, we need a Native American on some board, like, you know, some job application. But fundamentally, it's like relationship building. How are we showing up in community and connecting with community and building that rapport to find out, oh, is this person tokenizing the fact that they look like they're Native, but they're actually not Indigenous? i.e. a couple of the Pocahontas that play in different movies, always seeing Native passing people. How many of you are familiar with that piece of media of the crying Indian crying on, seeing all the pollution in the water? Did you know he's not Native? We have these realms that I'm quite familiar with. So, hi. So discussion, I'm down.
I love Kanyon's energy. It comes in like a big old mic drop of like, Native information, fools, keep it going. It's great. But so yeah, so we were talking about relationship building, and what you folks are obviously identifying some very basic things that people could do. Any other suggestions? Because I feel like this is going to be the section that people need to like turn their ears up and really listen to, of like, what are the things people can do besides just trying to check off a box?
I loved what Kanyon said. It really, and also I just watched another thing out of Native Voices at the Autry, and Delana Studi and Jennifer Bobby Wash, and I can't remember the other woman's name. But so this is just information that I've gotten, and also that I agree with. And so reaching out to communities, can you reach out, you say, hey, I want to do this part, you know, you find a Native dramaturg out of, you know, the 3 that are in the United States, and you know, you find, Zoom is incredible. So, we should have access to more, and also what Kanyon said was that, Native kids, maybe they do now, they know now because of this, but Native kids, I've been asked, how come there aren't any more? How come there aren't any more actors? It's like, because they didn't know. They know when the next softball tournament is or the basketball tournament is, but they didn't know that there's a monologue workshop being done by Alter Theater Company. They didn't know that Vicky Ramirez is going to teach all those kids from all over the country. That's incredible. And so to reach out to communities and say, hey, kids, tell us your stories, write that. So that's what people can do. They can reach out to communities, they can do all the work, they can and also know that we're not the experts of everything Native, right? And that isn't mine either. Probably nothing that I'm saying is mine, but we're not. I'm the expert of my experience, and so, and just like all of you guys are. So I just, just do the work, hire the people, fly them in from all over the country, and pay them like you would any other actor.
I'm similar. I have a similar phrase of that as build community, connect with community. So you have listening session opportunities to start listening sessions, reaching out to Native communities, and also looking into the Native organizations that are in your local area to highlight them. Because when you build relationships, one, you can get them to come to your space, but also if you start getting invites, you get to go to their space and learn what's going on there. And maybe there's potential workshops, because here in the Bay, we got Intertribal Friendship House, we have the Indian people working for change, we have Segurate Land Trust that has a Shumi land tax, aka gift tax, so helping Indigenous peoples get land back. In San Francisco, we have Ramaytush, the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone People, who is now a nonprofit, and they have a network of community that are intertribal community, but one, we follow respectful protocol. Who are the people of the land that you are on and benefiting from? And then through that, you learn about land acknowledgements. And then maybe in some of the spaces that you go to, you might even offer land acknowledgements. Or if you have a highlight piece where Indigenous peoples are highlighted, you also point out what's going on around that content, i.e., if you have a dramatic piece where a conversation touches on MMIW, missing and murdered Indigenous women, we don't just talk about it on stage. You actually might either have in the program or afterwards, or a list of organizations that support MMIW, of raising of awareness. Because I know I personally would find it slightly offensive of a random theater company who has no relation to Native peoples seeing these beautiful red dresses and conversations of MMIW, and they're like, oh, this is a cool topic. Let's have a beautiful red dress and let's maybe talk about it. And oh, they'll feel so great that we talked about it. And then they have no integral relationship to that information, let alone they themselves as humans, i.e. directors or actors or community members who made that production piece. If they themselves have never contributed or even familiarized themselves with such a topic, I would find myself quite offended, because it feels as though it's very tokenizing, taking the tiniest bit of information from it, not having a relationship with it, and going forward being like, oh, it's okay. They should feel good. It's kind of like that stereotypical, this will help your resume. Oh, the exposure will help you. It's like, we should start paying our artists. I understand helping interns and getting volunteers. That's for experience. But the whole, oh, they'll feel so good. We got to be careful with that. So building community, listing organizations and collaborating somehow, or learning how y'all have amazing strengths in both directions. Hiring either consultants or community members, and knowing that there is no be-all, say-all Native person who could give a stamp of approval. I my own self am a consultant, but I speak for both myself, and in times I will wear my community hat where I represent my tribal community because I am the daughter of a tribal chairwoman. And so I represent our Indigenous community. I don't speak for all Ohlone people. I am one community member who happens to have many lived experiences and a strong network of community that I am held accountable to. And therefore, I then do due diligence in how I represent myself and how I offer insight. And then I carry all the other titles with me because I'm a board member of a few Native organizations. I'm my own business person. I represent my business. So each layer has that, but there is no Native that can give you the stamp of approval because there's layers of history that play a role. And we all, even non-Indigenous peoples, are all deeply impacted by colonization. And so we should honor truth and history. Honor the past to shape the future. There's so much that we can learn from there, both on a creative inspiration layer, but also looking at the layers of inequities. I kind of want to call out some ages right here. Did anyone mention that if you were born before 1978, you were born before the Native American had the right to practice religion freely in America? Little not so known fact. Well, by many Indigenous peoples, we all seem to either know that, or once we do, we start like announcing that. When I learned, well, my mom taught me at a young age, but my mom did not know until the 80s. That's the part that she gets away with. She's like, up until the 80s, I did not know that the Native American did not have the right to practice religion freely, legally. Many of us were doing it underground. Doesn't mean it wasn't happening, but it does mean that it's constantly deemed illegal to be Indigenous. And then when people tokenize our culture and our community and our spirituality with no relationship to it, it feels spiritually grungy. And it actually, even though it might seem inclusive on the surface, it actually has a long-term toll, and it's very painful. And it's yet again another layered form of microaggressions, or not so micro, not so microaggression.
Well, and it kind of links into what Stephen had mentioned earlier in regards to the way that folks had to navigate in order to survive, right? Because, if we couldn't practice, or if we couldn't really be like, navigating to be seen, because we need to be able to also live. Something that you mentioned in regards to community and community building, and how theaters sometimes, or a lot of times, just take, like you mentioned, a portion of something to capitalize off of it, and they call it their community service or their kind of contribution to the community. But it's like, are you assuming what your quote unquote community needs? Or do you actually have like community dramaturgs, or are you actually doing some sort of research that is happening, what is occurring within your local regional community that is impacting, that would then benefit from having a certain story elevated or told? Or why are you bringing XYZ story here? And what is the purpose that's extending beyond just the stage? Just like you mentioned, Murder Missing Indigenous Women, it's like, great, cool, we have the show, but what else are we doing here? So it's not just simply capitalizing off of a very, very serious topic. I'd like to hear from Fran or Stephen. We haven't heard from you both in a little bit.
I had a question for Fran, actually. I was going to ask, since we were talking about these sorts of things, and an idea that popped in my head as Matt was talking about things was, we're all doing our best with these things, and there's a lot, mistrust and pain, but we can't control it all. We, sometimes that's going to happen. That's just going to be what it is. But that's where I want to offer praise to Z Space. Like, this is the work. You're having this conversation, you're building this right now. And I say, hooray, thank you. And like, this is what's up. And then I was like, I had an idea about, well, what would I would have wished happened when I was a youth? Because the children are important. This is actually, we don't want to put our adult pain on the children. So it's like if Z Space or a theater space had a free summer acting workshop, and you left these flyers with the reservations. You also put them in what do you call it, PWI schools, I don't know, bring us together. The children, they will meet each other, they will have fun, they will talk, they won't have the weights of all these judgments and opinions, and they will get to know each other, and they will be the new theater. And then we can do away with this with joy and peace, right? So there's an idea. So I wanted to ask Fran, when you were a youth, like what would you like, because like us artists, we have a temperament, it's common. Sometimes we're a little shy, some are louder than others. And I've had conversations with Fran too. There's like this similarity. So I was like, what would have gotten you to like be excited to like, or maybe not even just be excited, but to be like, oh, there's this thing that is available to me now that I can attend or go to support your artistic like life, and also meet people.
Well, that's a good question. For me as a youth, I think if there was, like if it was inviting and welcoming, and for me and my family, that means music and food, as well as the activity itself, right? So, and I think that might be like something that I see my family struggling with is with traditional theater, is that attending it feels a little alien to sit in the seat and just watch a performance when it starts feeling more like an event that I would want to go to or whatever, if there is that like community aspect of talkbacks, right? There is maybe a performance watching, but like there's something surrounding that, right? Like, hey, we're going to do like a community potluck, and then we're going to hold like do acting games, right? On top of that, like that's what I need now with the current time that we're living. But even as a youth, that would have been, what would have drawn me there is just time to commune in multiple ways, because I'm like shy and not shy. So like being able to choose like, hey, I'm gonna get like a drink of water and then come back in, and like having that like self-autonomy to choose when I'm engaging, when I'm not, I think is what like culturally makes sense to me in needing and that kind of an opportunity or event.
I love that. Fran, you kind of already, I love when y'all just transition into what my next little section is going to be. Because you were talking about, having a talk back and the opportunity to kind of separate yourself now as something you need as an artist now. What are some other ways that like Indigenous and Native artists are creating space for themselves, since a lot of PWIs are not? This is also a like good time to plug what y'all doing.
I'm so sorry, can you repeat that?
How are Native and Indigenous artists creating space for themselves, since PWIs are not creating a lot of opportunities for you?
So Fran and I started an organization called In the Margin, an arts and advocacy organization. It's Indigenous led, and I believe actually our executive director's on the call here too, watching the panel. Hi, Amber. And so, I mean, Fran, would you like to speak a little bit about ITM?
Yeah, our org was founded 5-6 years ago in response to systemic racism and xenophobia. So there's like, some trauma bonding from those years, but from then on, we kind of focused and realized our passion for new works and like really exploring intersectional new works that really combat like the idea of like monolithic experiences, and really just embedding joy into works, even if they are exploring thematic things of trauma, right? Like there's always, at least again, speaking from my experience in my community, there's always joy or a joke, even in the most like harmful times that we're bringing, again, communally together. Like, and there's like a energy or spirit behind that our company is trying to cultivate in the new works that we're working with folks, and it's, yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
And a little bit in regards to ITM, it's that we're not just a Native Indigenous organization. We are intersectional Cutie BIPOC organization. And so we are Cutie BIPOC centered, Cutie BIPOC ensemble, and that's our new works reflect that and our intersectionality, because we think that's beautiful, because that's how our lives are. We're not just siloed into one community. Like one identity can be, one person can hold and encompass so many different intersectional identities. And when you have all of these experiences coming into the room to explore works, it's beautiful. And a lot of the folks that make up ITM, we have all worked in different regional theaters. So we come with that experience, bringing in our administration experience from other regional theaters, because we were the ones who helped them, keep up and running. But it's more in regards to like, how do we utilize these skill sets to make sure that we are helping ourselves and we are uplifting one another? Because if this is not what we were receiving at a PWI, what happens when all of your admin people from different PWIs come together to then start to serve themselves? Well, that's what ITM is doing. And on top of that, we do a lot of civic engagement. So we really put forward our community service, volunteer service in the foreground, and utilize our artistic skill sets, such as like producing, to be community organizers, or dramaturgy to be people to provide information on like labor rights, and then our teaching artists to then facilitate those workshops, and how we can cross that and have our activists and our activist ensemble members also cross over to the artistic ground as well, because it's like, you're a community organizer, you can be a phenomenal producer, and how we can integrate art and activism that's a little bit more than just artivism. Yeah, that's just a little bit about us.
Similar. As well, one as a youth, what I would have wanted or needed, or what would have motivated me, I recognize that some things are I didn't go out and prioritize my own wants or needs in some of these realms. So sometimes it was access to things. So I know I would call into the radio to win something. And so like I would go to the Intertribal Friendship House, and there would be a raffle for, kids' toys or stuff, Christmas or Turkey Day. So where there's food and when there's means of interaction. So hands-on opportunities, but communal space were a circle, because dominantly in Indigenous communities, instead of having a master of all and audience following, it's a circle. Yes, we have talented beings who are facilitating or leading, who are ones we may lean to learn from, so mentee and mentor, but there's also, we face each other, and we all have that opportunity to share perspectives. And so I do that with workshops as well. And it's my goal to bridge out and build community as well with the circles that I work with. Like on my website, I write who I work with. And my goal is actually to have like a tier kind of hierarchy of like integral relationships where I'm like, I will vouch for this person and individual and organization. And then other ones where like I have professionally collaborated with and I am appreciating the work that they're doing. And then I'll have another tier where it's like, I professionally work with them. I am glad to have worked with them in the window of time that I have, but I don't know much about them, who they were, and I'm not sure I could vouch for them where they're at. And then the ones that tokenize me, where I'm like, yes, they vouch, they say that they worked with me, so they can have my name on their thing. But I almost don't, like, I didn't build a relationship with them. I don't know them. I don't know their work. So yes, I worked with them, but I don't know yet. So I my own self am figuring out how I navigate vouching or verifying like who I work with. But I my own self want to bridge connecting with organizations, because people do come to me saying, do you recommend or do you have any organizations? And my brain's like, I do, but I don't, because my dyslexia gets in the way. So my dyslexia and my never having been taught how to organize business contacts. Like I would love there to be someone who is neurodivergent to create a content or a project management system that works with me, both with like colors or images or something, where I could be like, oh, this business card is a person who said, I have these skills and I also make this request. So the people who go, hey, I would love to come to your land for ceremony. Okay, they want to come to ceremony. And I am a graphic designer, and if you ever need me to help with something of this level, I'm like, ooh, I would love there to be a business card saving app or something thing, but I would love to connect community. And so I will try and be looking into y'all's organizations as well, because I am in full support of the youth and also queer, BIPOC, all those communities. You know, we're the LGBTQ soup, alphabet soup, so to speak. And so the need is there. And so like my brain goes, man, if y'all had like little you know, like either gift cards or like what would have really motivated me is either some media player, or now today TikTok is super popular. You know, that ring light. Imagine if you got like 20 of those donated, those ring lights, and say, hey, young students, come to this workshop, and you know, first come first serve. You get a little thing for your social media post, and you get a call out in our social media post, so your work could be highlighted, or you know, whatever cool little, like, where it kind of does that little motivating thing where you tap them, or you know, can win some like eco-conscious makeup so you can, you know, glam and Vogue and all that fun stuff. So like, to me, I remember being a youth and needing a tiny bit of competitive edge in that realm. So workshops, I was always intimidated, like I was never good enough. When people would say like, you know, come to this workshop or come to this thing, I'm like, oh, I think other people are probably better than me. Because I was an introvert as a kid. I've shifted it into extroversion. So now I'm like, oh, go get it. But we need those in-betweens. We need those community members that do hold that space, who motivate, and that usually comes with community building.
Native Writers Theater Company, I guess. What we just had our first little thing that Jordan saw. So thank you so much, Jordan. And thank you, Stephen, for being part of that. But basically, Native Writers Theater wants to create space for Native writers, for Native Indigenous writers, and to help create, to produce, to perform your pieces, whether that's a reading or a workshop or whatever. So that's the goal, or full production. So the next thing that is, I think that is most important for Native Writers Theater is to create a writers retreat. Is the next thing. So all of y'all, you want to write some stuff, please hit me up, let me know. I have something in the works. I got my fingers crossed right now for a rather large place, hopefully in a beautiful town. So hopefully just send good thoughts, and if that works out, then hopefully in the next couple months I will put out some information on any Native writers who want to do that. And I don't know if it's going to be, depending on how long I can get it, if it's going to be a one-day thing or it's going to be an overnight, and it's going to be what, and I am totally open to suggestions on what we want to do. Do we want to have a facilitator? Do we need Kanyon to come and help us with those things? Do we need Jordan there to help us? Do we, you know, those are the types of things that, you know, I'm open for. This is all brand new. I want to write and perform in a bunch of different things. And so I want to help uplift and amplify the Native voice and create cool stuff.
Stephen?
I was just
I'm
like,
volunteering you to speak.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, sure. I mean, I was kind of just loving everything I was hearing from everyone saying. I kind of lost track of the question.
How, for you specifically, how are you creating space for yourself as an Indigenous artist? Either so, or what do you wish you'd had as a child? Like, I'm not going to let this go through without mentioning that you were part of the Native Indigenous Excellence music video that I thought was fire.
Oh,
like, I creep on all y'all. I hope you knew.
right. It's definitely yeah. I mean, what are we doing? What am I doing? Yeah, connecting and getting involved with the things that we want to create, and that's been my experience so far, and that's been what's been nice. Like I just recently met Matt like a few months ago. And he's been in the Bay Area the whole time. I've been here a couple years, and so it's just like, wow, cool, connect, you know. And I met Kanyon a little while back. It's like we it's like I kind of like what Matt said earlier was like, no, we don't need to be lifted up. We're not victims here. Like, if it's, everyone else might be afraid that that's what they think, but that's their own fears. Like, we are not victims. We are supporting each other. We're good. Like, and we're finding each other. So, and that's happening right now. So, yeah, just getting into creating. I guess for me personally, what am I doing right now? I guess I just want to help any way I can. I'm throwing a few creative ideas here and there, and I'm on my own transformation journey of what exactly service means in terms of wanting everyone to be together. Because I know that's, I just want everyone to be together, man. Like, like, and I'm, finding that thing of like, okay, well, who's going to do this work? Well, I want to get up, I want to be out there, I want to volunteer, I want to help someone with their thing. I do building skills, I might volunteer here or there, and trying to find that way. That's what's been up for me right now, is like, how do we heal and bring everyone together in a way that isn't with fear and aggression, but with actually excitement and happiness. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm writing a few things, but I guess just mostly hanging out with, I'm hanging out with people. That's what I'm doing.
I'd like to mention in the spirit of community building, I want to uplift someone who is currently watching this panel, and that's Shannon Davis, because Shannon is like Indigenous royalty here in the Bay Area. And I mean, I think maybe probably everybody on the call most likely will agree. And so it's just the work that Shannon has done in regards to connecting people, and in the way of getting people into regional theaters and connecting people and making sure that we are supporting one another, is having a huge positive impact that I'm seeing within the theater industry in the Bay. Now, also just in regards to Shannon for a little bit, because I love Shannon, I'm working with her on an opera, my first opera in Alaska in January. But my wonderful thing that I've been working with Shannon on is Braided. And so that's actually something that I believe Matt was part of, right? In regards to the event that you're speaking of, correct?
Yeah. Braided. I was really lucky enough. Shannon sent me an excerpt, and we wanted to do the full excerpt, and it was really hard to kind of cast it. So I was able to do the two tobacco monologues at the very beginning, and then the soulmates monologue. And since we did film it, I wasn't able to have it be in a the theatrical. It was more of a film thing. And so but I loved that. Réal and Stephen, I love that play. I love the excerpt. I haven't been able to read the whole thing yet. So
you will soon.
Anyway.
I mean, it's not at all. It's the entire thing is not written
right
yet.
But
go ahead.
Let's
Sorry.
Write it.
Exactly. Let's write it.
Yeah.
But this is something that Shannon reached out to like years ago and said, "Hey, I'm applying for this NEA grant. would you like to come over? She was working at Theater of Eugen, directing a play. It's like, would you like to come over, write a couple scenes and see if we can throw this grant together? I was like, yeah, why not? We got the grant, which was great. And then, Steven's one of the writers and Fran is one of our dramaturgs. And so it's like I mentioned, Shannon, the way that she just kind of grabs people and says, you need to meet, you need to meet, you need to meet, brings us together. And it's usually really, really great partnerships and community members that we tend to work with and connect with and meet. And I mean, Shannon is now part of ACT, American Conservatory Theater, as the director of community. I think it's community partnerships. Shannon?
Community connections, community
Community
collaborations.
connections.
There's something with alliteration there that's really good. Shannon, put your title in the chat.
Community connections. There it is. And yeah, anyway, I just needed to gush over Shannon for a little bit because she is, if folks don't know her work, please look into her stuff. Just phenomenal person.
Wonderful. Does anybody else have any final thoughts they want to share? Any more gushing over Shannon or Alter Theater or any of the other Indigenous organizations in the Bay Area?
Kanyon, you had mentioned a couple of the native places in the area, but also want to call out the Sonoma County Indian Health Project. They have a pretty good thriving program. A lot of cultural things there on that little board that they have in the hallway. So really cool little thing there. And I just want to say thank you guys to all of you. I want to. Actually, we should all hang out together. And Shannon, thanks for setting that up for all of us. I'm just kidding. She's the community connections, but we should all have a great dinner, and I'll make y'all some fried bread. We'll have some Indian tacos and
great, because I was gonna say Shannon makes a great cinnamon apple fry bread.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, we need that.
Yeah.
That's my gush.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring my sexy tacos. So okay.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
I love it.
A highlight is if any of y'all have not watched Real Engine, that's one step y'all can take too. So similarly, when we step into these, realms of unfamiliarity, like whenever I talk to youth groups, I say you need to watch Misrepresentation and the Masks We Wear when it talks about sexism in today's society. So when it comes to inclusion, there are plenty of reading lists, plenty of book recommendations. I have some on my website, but also in media, like look up the movie Real Engine, RELINJUN. One tiny step, not the be all end all, but it's one little layer of perspective sharing that plays a role in these realms. And then, open those doors to those documentaries of Indigenous peoples, because like a lot of people, we a lot of humans love to play off of poverty porn, and they like to play off of resilience and survival mode. And so the negativity, like we were soldiers or we were warriors, New Zealand, a film that I definitely identify with. But even though it's in New Zealand, I'm like, that's us too, as Indigenous peoples. And then there's so many. It's beautiful to see it represented in media, but it is painful that is what is highlighted. So many times we're just trying to honor truth and history to point out what has happened that has not been identified, that has not been acknowledged, so we can start healing. Because when people say, get over it, it's no longer that way, I'm like, you were never familiar with it, so how dare you even dismiss it? So I just wanted to point that out. So for those of you who are media people, check that out, and therefore some of those layers can come to the surface. And yes, gush, Shannon, you awesome. I wouldn't be here without people saying, hey, Shannon connected us. So much love.
And then to kind of add to that, I think to kind of like maybe folks are looking for exposure into different stories. There are plenty of plays on like the New Play Exchange that you can go and read that are joyful and do explore different, representation that is more aware of all the things. So I would really encourage to go read a play, right? That helps hype that up, leave a review for that play on that website, but you could also reach out to many of the theaters that we mentioned ask for recommendations, and they might have a few for you. Like, just reach out and we read some new stuff.
I love it. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm just going to go ahead and close this out for the evening. I want to thank all of my fantastic, personable panelists for this evening. You all were a delight to have. Fran, Stephen, Réal, Matt, and Kanyon. Thank you so much for being here. I want to thank our attendees for coming to this final Civic Conversation of 2021. I do want to also thank both of our interpreters, Lucy and Holly. Y'all have kept up with the crazy that has been happening, and it's fantastic. And I obviously could not do this evening without, again, doing a special thank you to Shannon Davis. Shannon is, in fact, Bay Area royalty. Feeling so lucky to know her. And also to Jeanette Harrison at Ultra Theater for all of the work that they are doing in the Bay Area. Literally, these are the people who you need to be talking to because they give you access to each other and new stories. So with that, I just want to do one last upcoming announcements at Z Space. Next week, we have Shoshana in December, which is a Hanukkah musical. It's on December 15th. It is actually sold out. I keep announcing sold out stuff here. I'm so sorry. But there is a wait list available on our website. We also have David Herrera Performance Company's The Tip of My Tongue, which will be in Z Space in January in person. And tickets are available online. Thank you all again. I'm hoping I can continue these conversations in 2022, maybe in person, maybe with all of you again. But again, have a lovely evening and just thank you all for coming. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks,
Thank you.
C-Space.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Holly.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys.